Ho, 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 it's Coding Santa here, and we're going to create a little Christmas advent calendar in this one. So I actually did that last year, but I recreated it with React and TypeScript in this one. So it's the same project, but I did it with TypeScript instead now. So hope you will enjoy it, and yeah, let's get started. All right, let's check out the application that we're going to build in this tutorial. And this is an advent calendar. I think that's the name in English also. I actually built this one last year, last Christmas sometime, but this one is in TypeScript, so that's why I'm excited to show you this one, because it's pretty cool. And the calendar works like this. You have a hatch here. I also think that's called a hatch in English. Hopefully you will understand what I mean at least. So you can open these hatches here, and we'll also store it in the local storage, as you can see here, as a calendar, because if you reload it, you can see that it will persist all the opened hatches. So that's exactly what we want with a calendar. And also you can, if you want to implement something yourself, you can challenge yourself and implement something that checks the day, so you won't be able to open the hatches if it's not the same day. So for example, I can't open the number 2 if it's not the 2nd of December. So that's something you can challenge yourself with if you want to build up on this one. All right, so that's the product that we're building in this tutorial. So let's go back to the code. And if you look down below this video, you also have a link to some starter files, because I want to provide you with these, because I've made some styles. We're not going to do the styles in this one. So this is the styles, the global style, and for the application itself. And then we have some styles for the hatch itself. You can see that it's quite a lot, but you can check it out if you're interested in how I've created these animations on the hatches and stuff like that. So this is basically a Create React app installation with TypeScript that I've done here. I've removed some stuff, but yeah, it's a Create React app installation, so nothing fancy about it. But one thing also that is, because I'm using TypeScript 4.1.2, I think, in this one, yeah. So you also have to change it in your Visual Studio Code editor. If you're using that one, you can see down below here, it says 4.1.2. You can change version here. So if you click there and select TypeScript version, you can see that it wants 4.0.3 as a default. So change this one to 4.1.2. Otherwise, you will get some warnings here in Visual Studio Code. So that's what I've done here also. But all right, this is the application. This is the base files that we're going to start from. So we have a typical index file here, nothing fancy there. I provided you with a helpers file, and this one contains a shuffle method. I found this one sometime last year. I haven't checked it now. There's probably an easier way to make it fully random. So you can change this one if you want also, but I've linked to it here, I can see, all right? So this is the shuffle version that shuffles all the hatches. And then I have a type for the hatches, because we're going to do this in TypeScript. So we're going to have a number, an image, and a text, and an open Boolean. So you can see all the hatches here that I have in an array. So I set this array to the hatch type that I created here. As we're in TypeScript, it's important to type stuff up, if you can say it like that, I don't know. So you can see we have the number, and then I have an image URL, and these images, I place them in the public folder here so that we can access them when the application is built. You could also, of course, place them in your image folder here, but it can be a little tricky sometimes to make it find images. So I place them in the public folder instead. So we have 24 of them. You can add more if you want, and you can remove them if you want. It doesn't matter. It will be dynamic. So that's the application. So let's get started. We don't have to do anything in the index file, and we're soon going to do something in the app file. But first, I want us to create the hatch itself, because that's the only component that we're going to create except the app component for this one. So inside the components, we have the styles. So let's create a new file inside the components, the /hatch. So we have a folder that's called hatch. Create a new file inside of that one and name it hatch.tsx. Really important that you name it .tsx, otherwise we can't work with JSX in TypeScript. Import React from React. I don't think actually we need this, but I'm not sure if it works with TypeScript, because now You shouldn't need to import React every time in your components, but I will do it for old habit's sake now. Then we need a hatch type that I specified in the helpers. You can see that I also export it here. So we can import this type and use it in our hatch component. So I'm going to mark it with types, import, hatch type from .. and .. again, I think. Why isn't it showing me? Okay, yeah, here it is. So helpers. And then we need the styles. So I mark it with styles, import. I call that component styled hatch from .. whoops, hatch.styles. Save it, and you can see I have this component here, styled hatch. And then I have created some classes. You could create your own components also for these classes if you want that. But I think it's overkill sometimes to create too many own components. So it's better to have a class. But this is only personal preferences, so you can do whatever you want. Then we're going to type the props for this one, because this one is going to take in some props. So type props equals. We're going to have the hatch data, capital D on that one. And then I give it the hatch type. So this is going to be one hatch. So we can use the hatch type here. And then we're going to have a function that's called handle click. And I think it says what it does on its own. It's going to be a function that takes in a number. So we have the nr colon, and then I type it as a number. And it's going to return nothing. So we return void. So that's the props types. And then we can create our component, const hatch. And this one is going to be a React functional component. And we have some types built in from the React library. So from React dot, we have the FC that stands for functional component. And then we're going to type the props. So we have angle brackets. And inside, we specify our props. We name them props, but you can name them to whatever you want. Like this. It doesn't matter, but I like to name them props. And then we have the function itself. So equals, parentheses, and then we're going to destructure out the props. So we have the hatch data. And we could leave it like this, but I'm going to destruct it one more level. So you can do that with colon and new curly brackets. And I have the number, text, IMD, and open. And this is getting quite long. I'm going to close the sidebar. And then I'm also going to destructure out the handle click like that. I'm actually going to put this one on its own row. That's better. And then we have the arrow function, and we can make an implicit return because we're only returning JSX. And before I do anything, I'd like to export default hatch like this, so I don't forget that one. And then we can create our JSX. So first we're going to wrap it in our styled hatch component that we imported up here from the styles. And this one also takes in some props. So I created a prop that's called open. So we're going to give it the open prop from the hatch. So I just send these along to my style component. We have a background. That one is going to be the IMD. That's the image for the hatch. And then we have the on-click on this one. So this one is no prop to the style components. This one is an on-click handler on the style component. So we have two props for the style components, open and background. And I'm going to show you them in a second in the styles. So on-click is going to be an inline arrow function that calls the handle click prop. And we give it a number. And we have to have an arrow function here to wrap it, because otherwise it will run this instantly. If we didn't have this one here, it won't work. So we wrap it in an arrow function. And you can, of course, also create it in your component up here, but then you won't be able to make an implicit return like I do. So it will be a little bit more code, but it's only preferences on how you want to do it. All right. I'm quickly going to show you the styles here. You can see that I also typed some props here for my style component. So that's how you type props in style components. You have style.div or whatever you have here. And then you have curly brackets and you give it the props. So I have an open prop and a background. So the background is going to be set here. And this is what I love about style components, because you can make them really dynamic. So I give it a different image depending on what hatch we're on. And also the open prop is going to be used here. So I can transform this hatch to rotate it depending on if it's set to open or closed. So that's why I use props in my style components for this one. All right. Inside the styled hatch wrapper component, I have a div that I set a class name to front. So this is the front of the hatch. And then I have a p tag and I give it a number like this. Then I have another div that has a class name back and another p tag where I set the text. And these texts are, I didn't mention that one. It's really bad one-liners that I found somewhere on the internet last year. So the one-liners is about Christmas, of course. So you can change these ones out if you don't like them also, of course, because I don't think, there may be one or two that's good. The other ones are not that good, actually. Okay, a little bit of coffee here. So that's our hatch component. I think we can save it and we can go back to the app.tsx file. You can see that I'm already importing useState and useEffect up here. And of course, I didn't mention, of course, start up your dev environment. You have a folder inside your starter files that's called start here. So install all the dependencies and start it up, of course. So this is how it looks now. We just have the background image. All right, so we're inside the app.tsx file, and I'm importing useState and useEffect, but we also want to import our hatch. So import hatch from .components/hatch, and we have the hatch file. If you created a file that's called index.tsx instead inside of this one, we don't have to type out hatch 2 times. But then we won't be able to see the name up here. So if you have a lot of tabs, it can be good to see that we're in the app. Otherwise, it will just say index, 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 if you name all the components to that one. So that's also kind of a preference, a personal preference on how you do that. All right, we import the hatch, and then we also want to import the types and our create calendar function from the helpers file down at the bottom here. You can see that I have a function, create calendar, and this one will call the shuffle function and return the shuffled array for us. So each time we're going to get a new shuffled array of hatches. So we import hatch type and create calendar from ./helpers. Helpers. Like that. So that's everything we need for this component, so we can start creating it. Let's start at the top in the app component. We're going to create a state, const hatches, and set hatches. We use equals useState. And as this is TypeScript, you can see that I typed the app here also with react.fc. We're going to set this to an empty array with a type of hatch type to start with. So we have an empty array and we set it as hatch type like this. And this will specify it as a hatch type. So if we hover over here, you can see that it says const hatches and it says that it's of the type hatch type, an array of hatch type. Right? And I think the first thing we're going to do is to actually, we can create the useEffects first and then we create the JSX last for this one. So first we have a useEffect that's going to run on initial mount. So we create a useEffect with an empty array as a dependency. And then I create a const inside of that one that's called calendar equals. And the thing I want to do here, that every time we start up this application, I want to check if we have a calendar in the local storage. So from local storage dot calendar, I'm going to call that key calendar in the local storage. And this is a turner operator and it's going to be quite long. Whoops. So I'm going to create a new row here. So I have my question mark in my turner operator. So if we have something in the local storage, if we have a key that's called calendar, And I'm going to use another use effect to actually set it in the local storage. So bear with me here. So I'm going to convert it with JSON parse. I convert it back to a JSON local storage dot calendar. And then if we don't have something in the local storage, we're going to call our create calendar function like this. And this one, usually when you call something outside of the use effect, it says that you want to specify it in the dependency array, but this one is created outside the scope of a React component, so it won't get recreated on re-render. So that's why it won't tell us that we need to specify this function inside the dependency array, because it's in the helpers, and that's outside of the scope of this component. So this one won't change. So that's why it don't tell us to specify it in the dependency array. If we had this function inside of the component, it will tell us to specify it inside the dependency array. All right. So we hopefully have something in our const that called calendar. Then we can set the hatches to the calendar. All right. So actually, I think, yeah, we can actually create the hatches now so we can see that it works. So down below here in our JSX, below the global style, remove this div here and create curly brackets. And the hatches, we're going to map through them. So the hatches is the ones that we actually set in state now. Hopefully we did. We're going to see if it works in a second. So we map through these hatches and we have a hatch, an arrow function. We can make an implicit return here also because we return a hatch. That's the component that we created earlier. We need to have a key when we map through things in React. And we have a unique number with the hatch.number. The hatch data is going to be the hatch itself on each iteration in this map. And we have the handle click. And for now, we don't have that one. So we set it to an arrow function that will return null. And you can see here also that if I, for example, remove this one, it will complain now because we have specified this hatch component to take in a prop that's called hatch data. So Typescript will warn us that we haven't set this prop on the hatch. So that's what's great about Typescript. It will warn you all the time if you do something fishy. And also, of course, we have to close the component here. So I think we're ready to try this one out. So I save the file. I go back. And you can see that we have our hatches here, but it won't work now, of course, because we haven't created our on-click handler and stuff like that. But it works and it should be responsive also. You can see that it is. So it will work on mobile, and that's sweet. You have a Christmas calendar that will work on the mobile. So we have to create our handle click function and also the use effect that will set this calendar to local state every time we do something, every time we click on a hatch. So I'm going to mark it with store calendar in local storage. Did I say set it in local state? Yeah, maybe I did. I mean local storage if I did. Okay. So I have another use effect. And this one is going to have a dependency array that will change when the hatches changes. So first I check hatches.length. We check if we actually have something in the hatches array. There's no use to setting something that's empty to the local storage. So if we have, this is a short circuit. I use double ampersands there. So if we have something in that array, I set the local storage dot set item parenthesis. I'm going to call it calendar. And that's also what I specified up here that I want to grab from the local storage. So it's important that these two match. And the thing that I want to set is our hatches state. And we have to stringify it first because you can only write to the local storage with strings. So JSON, stringify, and we give it the hatches. Do some auto formatting. So this one should set the calendar to the local storage. Save it, go back, and we can check so that it exists in the local storage. Just going to remove this one here. and then I reload the calendar, you can see that it is stored here. So that's great. We know that that one is working. We only have one more thing to do now, and that is to create our handle click function for the hatch itself. So const handle click hatch equals. It's going to take in a param that's called nr, and we specify this as a number. That's also what we specified it in the hatch component. You can see here we have number and a number, so these two have to match. And then inside of here we have to do something. Every time we click the hatch, we want it to flip around. And the one important thing here is that if we only could flip one hatch at a time and the other one will close when we click a new one, we could have just one state that says which number we clicked on. But in our case, we want all the hatches that we already clicked to be open also. And that's why if we look in the helpers, I have this property here that's called open. It's a Boolean, true or false. So that's why I set it on each individual hatch in this object here. And that's what we're going to do in the handle click hatch function now. So that's why I have structured it like this. So I create a const here, updated hatches equals, and I grab my hatches from the state and I map through them, and I have a hatch. And actually we can have an implicit return here also. So I have parentheses. Then I'm going to check if the hatch dot number, that's the hatch that we're currently on in the map iteration. So I have that number. That's the one that I showed you here before. We have a number on each hatch. So we grab that number and we compare if that number equals the number that we send in to this function. That's going to be the number on the hatch that we clicked. So if we're on the hatch that we actually clicked in our hatch array, we're going to do something. So I have a question mark, and we're going to modify this object in the hatch array. So first we spread out the old hatch. That's the one still that we're on here. We have a comma, and then we modify the open property. We have an exclamation mark, and we grab the hatch.open. So this means that we flip it. If it's false, it's going to be true, and if it's true, it's going to be false. So we change that one in this object and return that one. Otherwise, we just return the other hatches as they are. So we have a colon and return the hatch. So if the number doesn't match, we just return the hatch as it is. Yeah, I auto-formatted and it removed these parentheses here. All right, we don't need it. Okay, so we have our updated hatches inside of this one. Then we can set the hatches again with the updated hatches like this. So we have the handle click hatch function here. So instead of our empty one down here, we're going to give it the handle flip hatch. No, don't flip, handle click hatch like this. And this is not an on-click handler. This is a prop that we send into our hatch. So that's why I just give it this function, and we're actually going to call it inside here, as I showed you before with the on-click handler. All right, save it. And hopefully this should be it. I think it should be working now. I'm going to remove the calendar from here. And if we click the hatch here, you can see that it writes this one to the local storage. And it seems to be working like a charm. I reload it and it grabs it from the local storage. And it's sweet, it works. So this is my little, I call it simple Christmas calendar, but I shouldn't say that because if you're new to React and TypeScript, it probably won't be simple. But it's not that much code actually to create this Christmas calendar or Advent calendar or whatever it's called. So I think it's pretty neat actually. Hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to subscribe to my channel to support me. I will put up a lot of this stuff on my channel, and I already have a lot of stuff in React and all TypeScript and Svelte and Gatsby. You name it, I probably got it covered in my channel. See you in another one.